From birds' nests to beaver dams, the animal world is full of industrious builders. Coming up, we'll take a look at some of Georgia's most skilled animal architects, next on Georgia Outdoors.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible by a grant from Mary Hall Singleton and by the Imlay Foundation.
We humans don't have a monopoly on design and structure. The animal kingdom is populated by a variety of species who build. Perhaps our most commonly seen animal structures are built by social insects, bees, wasps, and ants. While there are many species of native ants found across the state, the ants we tend to be most familiar with are the pesky exotic fire ant species from South America.
Fire ants are very small ants individually, but they live in huge colonies, huge societies, upwards of several 100,000 individuals. They build very large mounds. They have a very nasty sting.
Fire ants were introduced to the Southeast in the 1940s and 50s and have since spread like wildfire across the land. These mounds, which are often home to more than 500,000 individual ants, are mostly found in wide open spaces, like your backyard.
There's a single queen in each mound, so a single soil mound or nest constitutes a colony. And that colony is, in fact, a huge nuclear family. It has a single queen who mated with a single male, who died several years previously, actually. She stores his sperm for years in a special organ and uses those sperm to fertilize her eggs. All the other individuals in the colony, besides that queen, are her offspring, her sons and daughters. So these are massive families. They're composed of hundreds of thousands of individuals, but they're nuclear families. They're all full siblings with a single mom and a single dad.
Fire ants are a member of the insect family Hymenoptera, a large family of mostly social insects that also includes a few of our other well-known animal architect invertebrates, hornets, bees, and one of the most aggressive backyard insects, yellow jackets. Yellow jackets often make their nests near houses and buildings. Although a nuisance for most, Michael Goodisman sees it as a perfect opportunity to learn more about these social insects.
We're out here collecting yellow jacket nests, and we get calls from the community in order to get them. And we work on yellow jackets and other highly social animals and social insects. Social insects represent one of the, some people have said, the greatest achievements of organic evolution because they display such incredible amounts of cooperation.
Nests can sometimes be difficult to access.
The species that are found around here, they typically almost always nest underground. And so a nest is founded by a single queen early in the spring. She comes out of hibernation and she'll find a little hole and start to build a nest herself. And she uses paper, basically, pieces of wood or grass, depending on the species. Some other social insects use mud. And she'll build up this nest underground. And over the course of several months, once the workers emerge, the nest keeps getting built bigger and bigger and bigger. The workers keep adding more and more cells until you get to hundreds or thousands of cells by the end of the year. So what we usually do is we use some kind of anesthetic, in this case ether, liquid ether, which we pour down their single entrance hole, and that knocks out most of the individuals in the nest. And at that point, we can pull out the nest. Is
that it?
I think so. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. We're always in full gear and full suits to make sure we don't get stung, because there's always a few that don't get knocked out. We pull the nest out, put it in a box, bring it back to our lab, let them wake up, which will happen in about 3 to 6 hours, and then we can do what we want with them. We just want to understand how these highly social systems evolved. We're just interested in understanding how that happens. Why are these animals so successful? Social insects are incredibly successful. Termites, ants, they're everywhere. They make up a huge amount of biomass, and we want to know how that's happened and why.
Another buzzing builder is the honeybee. Today, kids have come from all over the state to join the Georgia Beekeepers Association to try their hand at beekeeping.
Today we had the junior beekeeping class, and that's sponsored through the University of Georgia or the Bee Research Facility here and the Georgia Beekeepers Association. We put on several of those every year, and it's just basically where we can get a chance to bring young adults and children in and get them familiar with honeybees and the benefits of honeybees, take away some of the fear of dealing with honeybees, and we teach them about it, have presentation, we get to put hives together, we go through and light smokers, and then eventually at the end of the day we go out and we actually get to go through beehives, and the kids actually get to get their hands on a beehive themselves. You see how long her tail is compared to a regular bee? That's basically the whole purpose of it, is get them introduced to it and show them what it's all about.
While bees do build their own hives, they sometimes get a little help from beekeepers.
Beekeeping isn't just about going out to the bee yard and dealing with bees.
It was like puzzle pieces, and you had to put them together. First we glued them, and then we put some nails into them, and that's how we made them.
Pull it down, pull it down. There we go.
When working with bees, it's important to wear the appropriate clothing.
We always ask them to wear lighter color clothing.
Well, the veil was fun. Of course, I had to try 3 of them.
Once properly outfitted, the class can work safely without fear of being stung.
Today with the kids, it was more, let's just go in and have a look. Let's see if we can find the queen. Let's see the difference between the workers and the drones. Let's see where the honey is. Let's see where the pollen is. Let's see where the brood is located. This right here is mostly honey. Y'all can see the glistening water down in there.
We was going around seeing the beehives. I got to touch those things that you pull out.
These are where the babies are being raised. You see the different color of the honeycomb right there and how they got that capped off?
We got to look at the eggs, and we saw larvae.
What's all this right in here?
Babies!
Okay. As far as building the honeycomb, generally we put in a piece of what we call foundation, which can either be wax or plastic. It's generally embossed with the honeycomb imprint on it. And this isn't something that the bees have to have. They can do all this quite naturally on their own, and the bees take advantage of it. The hexagonal shape is very unique because it allows them to optimize the amount of room that they're going to be using on that honeycomb. They're going to save room, save space, and they're going to be able to maintain warmth and transfer heat through it better. In addition to that, it's also a great place for storage, of course, for honey. And most of your wax foundation can hold up to, I think it's 12 times more weight than its own self. What we've actually done is we put this queen in this little cage.
We looked at where the queen bees have hatched out, and then we saw where the queen was hatching and some of the bees were hatching.
I thought they were cool, and I thought in my head, man, I wish I could fly and eat all the honey I wanted.
The biggest thing that I hope they take from today is just an introduction to beekeeping, understand honeybees and the importance of honeybees, and not to have quite the fear that they may have had when they first came in this morning. Hopefully, some of these kids might actually come back and return to this in the future as a hobby when they become young adults or adults.
Oh, I see a drone! I see the drone! I see the drone I was looking for!
Insects aren't the only invertebrates known for their amazing design capabilities. Members of the arachnid family also create some pretty impressive structures. Most of us have had our fair share of encounters with spider webs, whether in the woods or around the house, but do all spiders build webs?
Interestingly, only about 10% of spiders actually make a web. So the vast majority of spiders never have a web. They're the inconspicuous little spiders that are crawling around hunting. However, the 10% that do produce webs are the showy ones, the ones that you notice. The ones that, as you're walking through the woods, you wrap your face in. So people tend to notice the spiders that produce webs. Spiders build webs primarily to catch prey. Remember, all spiders are predators. There are no vegetarian spiders. They use the web to collect their prey, to wrap up their prey, and then to consume their prey.
Just like any other structure, the spider web must be thoughtfully engineered.
The mechanics of making a web are intriguing. First, the spider has to find 2 objects that are the right distance apart, and that's what they will use as the base for creating their web. She then will spin a web between these two structures, and she will spin a web using what's called a hub and then the radiating spokes. So the hub, of course, is the center, and then there are spokes radiating away from the hub. Then she will start creating a spiral web within this system, and the spiral is the portion that has the sticky material on it. So the hub and the radiating spokes are not adhesive. However, the spiral portion of the web is what the prey will stick to.
To spin a web, spiders use special structures called spinnerets to make silk.
Silk is produced by silk glands within the spider's abdomen, and the silk is liquid as long as it's inside the spider. It is ejected from the spider's abdomen through little structures called spinnerets, and these spinnerets are projections that are like spigots through which the spider's silk is released. As the silk comes out, it's grabbed by the legs, the claws on the legs, and extruded and stretched. Within an instant, it will then polymerize and become what we know as silk, a dry product. Spider webs can be amazingly strong. In fact, spider silk has a greater tensile strength than steel.
The genus Argiope includes some of our more fantastic and common web builders. These include the large garden spiders we often see around our front porches and gardens. These are rather large, impressive spiders who build massive webs. If you've ever been outside in Georgia, chances are you've seen an Argiope web.
The Argiope spider is probably the showiest spider that we have. It's big, it builds a large web, and it's out there where we see it. If you've got a garden and you have an Argiope spider, you're very fortunate because she's taking care of a lot of the pests that would be eating your garden. Structurally, the Argiope web is probably not that different. It has the same components that most orb weaving spiders have. However, hers is very large and very strong, so she can catch some of the swiftest moths and some of the strongest insects. Even a good strong grasshopper can get caught in an Argiope web.
One thing that makes the Argiope web stand out is the unique zigzag structure.
The zigzag that is very characteristic of the Argiope web is called the stabilimentum. The reason for its construction is not really known. Some people think that it's used to keep birds from flying into the web and destroying the spider's web. Other people think that it actually attracts in prey, that things like spiders and moths are attracted to the stabilimentum and actually fly into the web and are attracted to it.
Many of us have experienced the adrenaline rush that comes with walking into a large spider web, but there's nothing to fear, as most spiders would rather not come in contact with you either.
Fear of spiders is called arachnophobia, and it's unfortunately one of the most common fears. Probably the reason that most people fear spiders is because they know so little about them. Once you learn about spiders, you can't help but be fascinated by them.
Though there are a couple of species of spiders in Georgia to be cautious of, the black widow and the brown recluse, these spiders tend to make their webs in out-of-the-way places. The vast majority of our web-making friends shouldn't be objects of fear, but instead should be recognized for their beauty, their contribution to the food chain, and their amazing instinct for craft and design.
If you'd like to learn more about plants and animals in your area, nature centers are a great place to start. Designed to educate the public about the local environment, nature centers offer many opportunities to find out more about your region. Many nature centers offer educational displays and museum exhibits that focus on local wildlife and ecology. Educational outreach activities and programs also offer visitors the chance to learn from experts and even experience hands-on learning activities. If you prefer to learn on your own, many centers have self-guided trails with interpretive signage, so you can get outdoors and test your new knowledge. For more information, visit this website.
Of all of nature's builders, some of the most beloved are our bird species. All birds build some sort of nest, and they come in all shapes and sizes. While wild turkeys establish temporary nests in depressions in the ground, Birds of prey such as eagles and ospreys spend years building elaborate nests in the treetops. Woodpeckers build a different type of nest altogether. But all these birds build nests with one thing in mind.
Well, the whole purpose of a bird nest is a place to raise the young. It allows a platform to hold the eggs while the adult bird incubates those eggs, and also, in most cases, to hold the young birds while they're being raised until they can fly. With Georgia, we have such a variety of habitats that we have a huge variety of birds that nest here. We've got some that nest only in the mountains, some that nest only on the coast, some that are all the way in between. But we've got probably a couple hundred different species of birds nesting in Georgia.
We asked Jim Osier of the Department of Natural Resources to share a few of his favorite types of bird nests with us.
Well, birds do use a variety of materials and a variety of different designs when they're constructing the nest, and it depends on the individual species. And a typical cup-shaped nest might be this one right here. You see it's very much a very deep cup made out of fairly soft straw and other materials around the edges here. But it's also a nice shelter, and that would have held the eggs for maybe a week or two while they were hatching, and the young birds for a time after that. Another type of nest is a lot of people might be familiar with is the American robin, and this might be a typical setting for a bird that builds a cup nest. And the robin in particular uses lots of mud and materials to hold it together, so it's again sort of a heavy nest. But you can see here they've adapted to using some materials that would not have been here a couple hundred years ago. Here's some nylon netting, some pieces of cord and carpet. It's actually green carpet there. So they use a lot of materials that otherwise would not be found, but work well into a nest for structure and for padding. Most folks are familiar with the Carolina wren. Again, this is the one that nests in garages and storage sheds. They always look for something to hold the nest. So this is a nest that doesn't hold itself together very well, but they raise lots of little wrens. And of course, when they first come out of the nest, they're vulnerable to kids and cats and things like that. So if you find a pair nesting, usually just leave that alone and they'll be through shortly. Interesting nest here. This one is a cup-shaped design, but instead of being supported by the crotch of a tree, this one's actually hung from a fork. And this is a nest of a white-eyed vireo. One advantage to being out on the end of a twig is this could not support a larger predator. So if a raccoon were to attempt to try to climb out to get to this, this branch is probably going to dip down and maybe even break. Another interesting design is a chimney swift. Now, some folks have had these actually nesting in their chimneys or old wells or buildings, but the chimney swift builds this nest entirely of small twigs that are held together with a saliva, which is a very sticky glue-like substance the bird produces. And this would be attached to the wall of the chimney like that. Just by looking at what materials are used and by looking at the location of the nest, you can often determine who built that. And birds instinctively know how and what kind of nest to build, so it's not something they really learn from their parents. They're much too young when they're spending time in the nest to learn from that, but instinctively they know where, how, and when to build a nest and what to do in that nest. So it's really an amazing phenomenon in nature.
In the spring, when bird life is most active in Georgia, you often don't even have to leave the backyard to get a glimpse of bird builders in action.
Common birds nesting around any suburban yard might be a brown thrasher, for instance, a cardinal. If you have nesting boxes around, you might have chickadees and tufted titmice. And if you have an open yard with lots of sunny, grassy areas, bluebirds are pretty easy to attract.
Some of the most impressive nests belong to birds of prey, eagles, osprey, and hawks, who build their enormous homes far above ground level.
Bald eagle nest is the most substantial one you'll see in Georgia, and they use large sticks, sometimes up to an inch or two in diameter, maybe several feet long, and they'll break those off, usually off standing trees, but may pick them off the ground as well. But the nest is going to be several feet across and sometimes can weigh several hundred pounds. And since eagles do return to the same nest year after year, they tend to add on to it each year, and the nest can grow quite large over years. Osprey is a bird that's also found around the water and also builds a very large nest. In fact, they're often mistaken for eagles. Osprey nest is made of large sticks just as well, and it's going to be right near the water. Usually more open though. Ospreys will build on top of a power pole or a bridge structure or just a platform set out in the water for them to nest on.
On the other side of the spectrum, the hummingbird builds a different sort of nest.
Well, the smallest nest we have in Georgia would be that of the ruby-throated hummingbird. And it's a tiny structure, only about as big as a half of a walnut shell. And it's held together with actually spider webs mostly. So it's built out of just very light mosses and lichens and very hard to see. It blends in ideally with the branch that'll be holding it.
An avian architect of another design, Georgia is also home to several species of woodpeckers, whose nesting cavities can be seen in tree trunks across the state.
Most people are familiar with woodpecker nesting. Of course, they go in, find a piece of a dead tree or an entire dead tree, and they'll drill out a cavity that we'll use for roosting and for nesting. And we have the large pileated woodpecker, which is as big as a crow and might have a nest cavity 3 inches across, very noticeable, all the way down to the very small downy woodpecker, whose nest entrance might be only 1.5 inches or so.
A popular stop for many migrating species, the Georgia coast is a haven for nesting birds.
On the Georgia coast, we have many species of birds that are specialty nesters, and they nest only on the sands of our outer coast and in very special spots, very isolated spots of the coast. Most of the seabirds that you're familiar with when you come to the coast nest right on the ground. Our pelicans, gulls, and terns are all specialty beach nesting birds.
Some birds nest together in a colony called a rookery. Rookeries can be on the ground or in trees. One of our largest and most common coastal bird species, brown pelicans, can be found nesting on the Georgia coast in large numbers. This colony of pelicans is nesting along the dunes of Little Egg Island, a protected barrier island on the Georgia coast.
Little Egg Island Bar is an accreting island in the mouth of one of our rivers, and the sediments coming down that river have created this very unique spot. Have what we believe is currently the largest brown pelican colony that's approaching 3,000 pairs of birds. The numbers of birds are just phenomenal. We have the largest nesting colony of royal terns in the southeastern United States. We're talking about close to 20,000 royal terns nesting in one spot.
Other inhabitants of Little Egg Island, the brilliantly colored oyster catcher and the demure Wilson plover, lay their eggs directly in the sand. They prefer a more isolated lifestyle than the colonial nesters do.
American oyster catchers nest in territories. Wilson's plovers are another one. It's a strategy they use. They nest in isolated areas. They try to stay away from the raccoon traffic on the ground. They nest on big beach flats or way up in the dunes.
Other coastal birds nest in trees. Along the freshwater ponds of our barrier islands, you'll often run across large colonies of egrets, herons, and hinga, and other birds making their nightly homes in the safety of the treetops. One of the more striking of these bird species in Georgia is the endangered wood stork. These wood storks are nesting at Harris Neck National Wildlife Refuge.
Well, our premier, most popular species, of course, is the wood stork. Not only is it large and easy to see, but it's an endangered species. It draws a lot of attention, and we're quite proud of the fact that we pioneered the first artificial nest platforms for storks here. But fortunately, our storks are now moving away from those structures onto cypress trees that we also planted. And these birds will either be nesting there or just loafing there most of the year. It's possible even in the middle of the winter to see some storks here at Harris Neck.
From birds who nest in trees to birds who nest in the sandy soils of our beaches, it's important to be respectful and cautious of our avian friends.
Humans or dogs on the beach will be one of the main causes for the birds actually leaving the nest area. Once the nest is not protected by an adult, when we intrude, we're not only keeping the adults off of eggs that can be harmed by the heat of the sun, but we're also exposing them to additional predation.
Birds, spiders, ants, and wasps are some easy-to-spot animal architects in Georgia, but one species is a little more secretive. Beavers are nocturnal animals well known for their building abilities. Seen by some as a nuisance species, beavers are actually a vital part of the woodland ecosystem.
Beavers are found throughout the state. However, south of the fall line, the Macon-Augusta area, Farther south from there, they're not as prevalent because of the sandy soil environments.
Beavers are most notorious for their dam building. These hard-working rodents do this to help protect their homes, known as lodges, from predators and to provide easy access to food in the winter.
Beavers damming is actually extremely beneficial because the flooding causes wetlands to occur, and honestly, over half the endangered species in the world spend at least some part of their life in a wetland environment. And this is also good for purification of river streams going through wetland environments.
While beavers are nocturnal and tend to be quite shy and hard to spot, a good place to see them in action is at the Chattahoochee Nature Center.
We have 2 beavers. They actually came to us when they were 3 days old. The beavers were orphaned and they were brought to us, where we kept them in our wildlife clinic for 5 years while we were building the habitat that they're in now. They're completely hand-raised, cannot be released, and beavers commonly live with their family group for 2 years. These guys were on their own at 3 days.
The animal world is full of ingenuity when it comes to building structures, whether to catch prey, to raise young, or to defend against predators. They're built for a variety of reasons, and their magnificent creations can be found throughout the state of Georgia, starting in your own backyard.
Funding for Georgia Outdoors has been made possible by a grant from Mary Hall Singleton and by the Imlay Foundation.